Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria wields a big stick, dissolves a board of the Bank of SKYE Bank, a board management appointed. President Muhammadu Buhari reorganizes NNPC, approves new board of directors with Ikpeazu as chairman. Resident doctors in Osun State suspend 9-month-old strike to give way for more meaningful dialogue. And suicide bomb hits one of Islam's holiest sites, the Prophet's Mosque in Medina.
And on business news tonight, SKYE Bank shares decline hits local equities ahead of Eid al-Fitr celebrations.
And on sports news tonight, it's no troubles at all for top seeds Roger Federer, Andy Murray and Serena Williams as they cruise into the last 8 at Wimbledon.
I'm Yemisi Ikpeazu, and from Abuja, U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria says Nigeria has a good ally in the United States.
Tonight we begin with the Central Bank of Nigeria formally announcing the replacement of the board members of SKYE Bank. The governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, revealed this at a briefing with journalists in Lagos. At the meeting, he explained that the move became necessary in view of SKYE Bank's inability to meet regulatory capital adequacy ratio. Channel's business news correspondent, Temple Ashaju, reports.
These proactive moves have become unavoidable in view of the persistent failure of SKYE Bank PLC to meet minimum thresholds in critical prudential and adequacy ratios, which has culminated in the bank's permanent presence at the Central Bank of Nigeria lending windows. In particular, SKYE Bank's liquidity and non-performing loans ratios have been below and above the required thresholds, respectively, for quite a while. To this effect, the chairman of the board, all other non-executive directors, the independent director, the managing director, the deputy managing director, and the 2 longest-serving executive directors have voluntarily resigned their appointments with immediate effect.
Takeover or no takeover? That has been the debate about SKYE Bank until this morning when the board members of the financial institution voluntarily tendered their resignations. The lender's national scale was downgraded to BBB and A3 last year by Global Credit Ratings. According to GRC, the rating was valid till June this year. At this briefing with journalists, the Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele explains how the lender had been at the beck and call of the CBN for liquidity.
These proactive moves have become unavoidable in view of the persistent failure of SKYE Bank PLC to meet minimum thresholds in critical prudential and adequacy ratios, which has culminated in the bank's permanent presence at the Central Bank of Nigeria lending windows. In particular, SKYE Bank's liquidity and non-performing loans ratios have been below and above the required thresholds, respectively, for quite a while.
Following the board members' resignation, the Central Bank has reconstituted a new team.
Fortunately, in the overall interest of the bank, the chairman and some board members have decided to resign their appointments from the bank with immediate effect. Consequently, by virtue of the powers vested in the governor of the CBN, we have decided to reconstitute the board and management of the bank and appoint new members with the sole responsibility of ensuring the speedy restoration of the health of the bank. To this effect, the chairman of the board, all other non-executive directors, the independent director, the managing director, the deputy managing director, and the 2 longest-serving executive directors have voluntarily resigned their appointments with immediate effect. In their place, we have selected industry experts and people of high integrity who we believe can turn the bank around. In this regard, we have selected Alhaji M.K. Ahmad to be the new chairman, while Mr. Tokunbo Abiru will be the new managing director.
The dissolved SkyBank team had informed Channels Television in January of its capacity building plans around risk management framework.
We built capacity. We brought in a good number of people who have done it in other jurisdictions as well, to make sure that every segment has the appropriate risk management framework to minimize losses. There will be losses. Once we lend money, there will be losses. But what we are talking about is reasonable level of losses.
SkyBank had issued a profit warning in March over its 2015 financial statements, asking investors to expect a material decline. Investors are, however, still in want of the statement, which is currently estimated at about 700 billion naira loss. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
To legal matters now, the Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has granted bail in the sum of 250 million naira each to a former Minister of Aviation, Chief Femi Fani-Kayode, a former Minister of Finance, Denadi Usman, and one Danjuman Yusuf, who are being tried by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for allegedly stealing and laundering about 4.9 billion naira. Delivering his ruling on their bail application today, the trial judge, Justice Sule Hassan, held that there was no evidence that the defendants will interfere with trial if granted bail. The judge also held that denying the defendants bail, especially as the court's vacation is near and would span through the expiration of August, will not serve the interest of justice. Justice Sule Hassan then granted the defendants bail with 2 sureties each in like sum. The sureties must own landed properties within the court's jurisdiction and must present to the court evidence of tax clearance. The defendants were also ordered to deposit their international passports in custody of the court pending the determination of the case. The offence, which was allegedly committed between January 2015 and March 2015, carries a minimum sentence of not less than 7 years, but not more than 14 years in prison. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has fixed July 7th for hearing of application filed by Mr. Okezie Ikpeazu for the stay of execution of the court judgment sacking him as governor of Abia State. The Federal High Court in Abuja had last week sacked Mr. Ikpeazu and asked the Independent National Electoral Commission to issue his opponent in the PDP primaries, Mr. Uche Oga, a certificate of return. Mr. Oga, who came second in the PDP primaries, has asked the state chief judge to swear him in, but Governor Ikpeazu is asking the court to set aside the ruling pending the hearing and conclusion of the appeal of the case he filed. Mr. Ikpeazu was sworn in as governor of the state last year, and his victory was challenged by APGA's candidate, Mr. Alex Oti, up until the Supreme Court, where he emerged victorious. Away from legal matters, the chairman of Atlantic Energy Brass Development Limited and Atlantic Energy Drilling Concept Limited, Mr. Jide Omokore, and 3 others have been arraigned at a federal high court in Abuja. They were arraigned on a 9-count charge of criminal diversion of over $1.6 billion, alleged to be proceeds of petroleum products belonging to the federal government. When the charges were read to them, Mr. Omokore and his co-accused, pleaded not guilty. They were then granted bail in the sum of 50 million naira each, with 1 surety who must be owner of a landed property in the Federal Capital Territory or a senior civil servant.
The chairman of Atlantic Energy Brass Development Limited and Atlantic Energy Drilling Concepts Limited, Mr. Jide Omokore, and 3 others arrived in the Federal High Court, Abuja, in the company of officials of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. At the opening of the proceedings, lawyers to the accused persons argued that their clients cannot take leave because the prosecution has not provided proof of service on Kolawole Aluko and the former Minister of Petroleum, Daisani Alison Madeke, who are both said to be at large. The counsels argued that the former minister and Aluko have been charged alongside Omokore and 5 others, but the prosecution have failed to list them on the defendants' list. The lawyers urged the courts to direct the anti-graft agency to put its house in order before bringing the charges against their clients. In a short ruling, Justice Binta Nyako agreed with the defendants that the charges placed before the court is not ripe for hearing. Following the ruling, Prosecutor Rotimi Jacobs quickly made an oral application to strike out the names of Alison Madeke and Aluko from the charge sheet. He also applied that the court allow the accused persons take their plea. All the accused persons pleaded not guilty to the 9-count charge and were granted bail.
The defendant wants to be arraigned because the fear is that they will be sent to prison because of the holiday, that before the time they will perfect their bail. So they were trying not to put all sort of obstacles against arraignment, and at the end of the day we were able to circum that.
We will allow the court take evidence, and at the end of the day we intend to show to Nigerians that what has led to this charge, insinuations, arose from a civil contract between his companies and the NPDC to lift crude oil and do some servicing.
Mr. Gideon Mokore, his 2 companies, and 3 others are accused of involvement in various petroleum product fraud. The trial has been fixed for October 19, 2016. Amaka Okafor, Channels Television News.
A federal high court sitting in Port Harcourt, the River State capital, has granted relief sought by the People's Democratic Party. According to Justice Abdullahi Liman of the Federal High Court 1, the National Convention held on May 21, 2016 in the state capital was legal and did not go contrary to any law. The trial judge also held that the dissolution of the National Executive Committee, the National Working Committee, and the constitution of a caretaker committee to oversee the affairs of the party by that convention was valid. According to the lawyer to the PDP, this signals the end of the PDP leadership crisis.
Resolutions made at that convention stand and are lawful. The implication of that is that the leadership tussle, as it has been branded, has come to an end. There was never a tussle in any event, but the court has effectively now made it clear that Senator Ahmed McCarthy, who leads the National Caretaker Committee, have full valid powers, and they are entitled to exercise executive powers of that party over its affairs, at least for the interim period of 90 days, as the convention itself had resolved. I think with that we have some clarity as to these issues.
Meanwhile, Mr. Sheriff has insisted he remains the chairman of the party until the Court of Appeal sets aside an earlier ruling of a federal high court in Abuja, which was in his favor. According to him, the federal high court in Port Harcourt is of equal ranking with that in Abuja, and therefore cannot make him vacate office until a higher court rules otherwise. Activities have returned to the Ladoke Akintola University Teaching Hospital in Osogbo, Osun State, as resident doctors have agreed to suspend their 9-month-old industrial action. The resident doctors had embarked on an indefinite strike on September 28, 2015, to press home their demands on issues relating to remuneration, injustice, and the training program. Addressing newsmen in Osogbo, the state capital, President of the Resident Doctors Lautech Teaching Hospital, Osogbo, says the suspension of the strike is to allow all negotiating parties commence implementation of the conclusions reached.
Was held on the 1st of July on Friday.
In part 2, after the break, we'll have more on that resolution by the resident doctors in Osun State. I'll be joined on the news at 10 by the first vice president of the resident doctors of Nigeria, NARD. Also, the military averts tragedy in Mungono, Borno State as officers stop a suicide bomber. Please join us again.